Hi and welcome to FBU Podcast. My name's Tam McFarlane. I'm a National Officer for the Fire Brigade Union and also the host of FBU Podcast. Being shown for the first time now on video, so you can access it on YouTube, as well as via your normal podcast link. Now, I'm joined today by FBU General Secretary Steve Wright. Welcome, Steve. To discuss a very serious issue. So in today's episode, we'll be discussing the launch of the FBU National Cuts Kill campaign, where we are now, what's been happening nationally and indeed locally, and what members need to do in this. But also, please stay tuned until the end because we've got some important updates on our fight for proper recognition and indeed prevention of firefighters with cancer, as well as an upcoming health and safety summit that the FBU is going to be hosting. Okay, so cuts kill. Well, for over a decade, deep cuts have hollowed out the UK Fire and Rescue Service. Across the country, firefighters are riding in crews of 3 or less. The minimum should be 5, with some fire engines not even leaving the station because there aren't enough firefighters to crew them. Just to give our listeners and indeed now our viewers some figures, in Buckinghamshire, they're facing a dismantling of their on-call duty system, the retained firefighters' duty system. 2 fire station closures are proposed and 7 fire appliances are being removed. In Scotland, where we've seen chronic underinvestment, there's been resulting crumbling real estate, station closures and cuts to firefighter roles. Dorset and Wiltshire, of course, they are currently in a consultation about 8 fire station closures, 96 firefighter redundancies and 14 frontline fire appliances removed. And of course in Oxfordshire, we'll be discussing in more detail shortly. That's facing 3 station closures, 42 forced redundancies, 6 fire engines taken off the run and only 5 fire engines available at night to cover the entire county. So Steve, these are incredible cuts, really serious situation, cuts that put not just firefighters, but also the public at risk. Cuts that can kill. Can you first talk us through how we got there, so the background to this position, what events have led us up to this point, and indeed what the Cuts Kill campaign is actually about?
Yeah, of course. Well, look, Tam, I think anyone that's worked in the fire service over the past 10 to 15 years has seen a massive decline in the fire and rescue service and our ability to respond to our communities, to the amount of incidents that we attend to as firefighters. But look, we went through the years of austerity, which cut the fire and rescue service to the bone, and it's cut it to dangerous levels right now. That's why we're saying cuts do kill, and there are consequences to political decisions that have been taken over time. But if you look at the figures of losing 12,000 firefighters since 2010, and that was pretty much across 8-year period where we lost 12,000 firefighters. So that has an impact. It means that there's less firefighters working in fire stations. It means there's less firefighters working in our control rooms to take the 999 calls, to deploy resources to where they're needed. But it also means that we're riding fire engines with less people. Ordinarily, when we started in the service town, or certainly when I started 25 years ago, we had 5 firefighters on a fire engine. Routinely now, up and down the country, it's 4, and in some dangerous levels of 3 firefighters on a fire engine.
Just on that point, Steve, I mean, it will beg a belief to firefighters who are used to riding normal crewing levels to hear that we've got colleagues up and down the country who are indeed expected to ride 3. Just set out why that's so dangerous to our listeners.
Well, look, anyone who's been a firefighter will know why you need 5 people on a fire engine to carry out safe policies and procedures, the use of breathing apparatus, have a dedicated BA entry control officer, a safety officer at certain instances. That's why you need 5 firefighters on a fire engine. But look, we have ridden with 4 for a number of years in some places, but we've always ensured that maybe the first appliance had 5 on it and the second appliance had 4. So that's what we're trying to work towards now, a national standard around that. Because when you've got 3 people, it is unsafe to offensively fight a fire, to enter a premise. How would you stabilise a vehicle at an RTC? It's beyond dangerous, and that we've collated that information about where crews of 3 are operating. We're building our campaign around that. This is what this Cuts Kill campaign is about. It's not just that cuts kill because you've got 3 people on a fire engine. It's cuts kill because you're closing fire stations or you've not got as many firefighters as you used to. So it's about encompassing all of those, because whatever cut you make is having an impact on the safety, as you say, of firefighters, but also the safety of the public.
Now, this is a national campaign. It's been launched launched nationally very recently, but it's also got a very local dynamic to it. Talk us through the local parts. What are we asking officials and members in fire and rescue services to do?
Yeah, I'll come to that, Tam, but if you want to take on one fire and rescue service, if you want to make cuts in Oxfordshire, in Dorset, in Scotland, well, there's the whole of the Fire Brigades Union that are going to come back fighting. And we saw that when we all met in Oxford, officials from all across the UK coming together to send a loud and clear message to the employers, to the government, and in that case to the county councillors in Oxfordshire, to say, look, if you are going to make cuts in Oxfordshire, if you are going to cut jobs here, well, then the National Fire Brigades Union are right behind this campaign, and we will come back fighting collectively and together. So I think it's around that. It's making sure that people understand that wherever they come for us, on whatever level, whether that's a closure of a station, the decimation of a shift pattern, the introduction, as they want to in Oxfordshire, introducing 12-hour shifts, whatever it is, the National Fire Brigades Union are going to stand behind those members and fight it.
Absolutely. Now, it's important to say when we talk about fighting, there's been some victories, by the way. This isn't stuff that's just happening to us. Members have fought back at a local level and indeed won. We've pushed back against the cuts. We've done it in Avon and elsewhere. Just a comment about that.
Well, look, they've run fantastic campaigns, and we've seen this across the UK. We saw in Wales they ran a good campaign, a great campaign to stop the introduction of dangerous shift patterns over there. But also, it has been around the political lobbying. It has been about that campaigning. Which has managed to shift the dial in some places, and we have managed to save jobs, stop station closures in the places like Avon, as you mentioned, Sam. However, that these are still existing, these cuts are still proposals on the table in many places. So it is around that continuing the political lobbying. It is about continuing that campaign at a local level. But I think more than that, and what we're saying at the moment, is about getting our union on an industrial footing, which is why we've launched the consultative ballot in Oxfordshire, for our members to have a decision on what those next steps are. Because every station that I visited in Oxfordshire, and I worked there for a number of years, is people wanting to know, what can we do to take industrial action to stop these cuts?
Yeah, and that's actually about defending the service, isn't it? I'm always very struck. I mean, we always say the caveat, and it's true. It's the last thing firefighters want to do is take industrial action. But just to be clear, the scale of these cuts, we can't stress enough how dangerous they are. I mean, firefighters are, even today, getting asked to put their lives at risk just through a normal part of their job. But these cuts put our people, firefighters, in an extraordinarily dangerous situation. We talked about 3 in a pump. I mean, Steve, we just go back to that issue. We've talked before, both you and I were operational firefighters for a length of time, some longer than others, as it were. But they're sending crews of 3 out, so a firefighter and firefighters and a fire engine, just 3 of them, get sent out onto a shout. And they say there's strict measures in place to protect them. They're told they can only fight defensively. I think we would ask our listeners and viewers to put themselves in a position. Firefighters turn up at an incident. It's a fire. They're told then that there's people trapped inside. What on earth are firefighters meant to do other than go in that building? And yet you and I know, by doing so, would compromise their safety. You must get angry about the politicians and the managers that are putting our members at risk in that way, don't you?
100%, Sam. Look, I think the number one job of the Fire Brigades Union, of any trade union, is to make sure that our members are kept healthy and are kept safe in their workplaces. And look, we've seen that safety net, I suppose, of response standards that had a national standard back in the 90s, and when I joined the job in 2001, that those response times have been extended by about 3.5 minutes longer than we were in the mid-1990s attending incidents. So that has an impact. So when you do turn up at jobs, whatever that is, whether it's a flooding incident, a fire, an RTC, our lives are being put at risk because those incidents situations are getting worse, fires are growing, and then we're sending firefighters into these risk areas. And look, I've been in these positions where actually we're delayed getting to these areas, communities that no longer have fire stations, where we've seen fire stations being closed over the years. Once they're closed, you don't get them back. And I think that's what's making people angry right now, especially in Oxfordshire and Dorset and Wiltshire, retained fire stations being taken out of the heart of these communities. And we know firefighters do more than just attend operational incidents in their communities. They do far more preventative work than we ever used to. So taking that, I think, the beating heart out of those communities, the work that firefighters do, will have a massive impact on community safety.
And I think we've seen in some of the consultations that have been going on in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire and indeed elsewhere, Dorset and Wiltshire of course, that when retained stations come under threat, The public reaction is extraordinary because the people value their community fire station. So we've got a lot of public support then. Do you think that channels into an impact with the people running these consultations?
Well, I think so. And I think what we've seen recently is questions being raised in the Houses of Parliament. Yeah. We saw last week the Prime Minister answering questions around the cuts in Dorset and Wiltshire. Yes, that's been because of the campaigns that the Fire Brigades Union have been running, but it's also been because members of the public have been speaking to firefighters, people they know, people that they live and work with in those communities, raising the concerns. That if you want to know what an impact closing a fire station will have, you talk to the local firefighter. Absolutely. And I think that's the message that is now getting through. You can do all the public consultation you like. The only consultation I believe county councils and fire authorities need to do is talk to the firefighters that work in these communities, talk to them about the impact of a slower response time, talk to them about having to cover in neighbouring areas of where fire stations have been closed, talk to them about only having 3 firefighters on a fire engine. Yeah. That's the consultation that we think the public and MPs and councillors and the government need to be having.
But I've looked specifically at one a consultation in Dorset and Wiltshire, and I have to say, Steve, it's contemptuous. You know, the questions are getting asked, you see predetermined, preordained. It's almost like a consultation being done by lip service. Again, our members are rallying hard against that. We're going to have to make these people listen, aren't we?
I think so, and I think this is what the campaign's about. This is not about pay. It's not about our pensions. It's not about our terms and conditions. This is about safety. It's about firefighters really concerned right now about their own safety, the safety of their colleagues, and the safety of the public. Because what they're seeing over the years of austerity is that we're unable to perform the jobs like we used to.
Yeah. Now, Steve, the recent massive fire on Glasgow city centre. Now, we're not going into the details of it, of what impact cuts in the fire service may have had. Those investigations are all taking place. But surely that brings home the reality of what firefighting is and why the public requires a properly funded fire and rescue service because of these types of incidents. Now, you mentioned previously the political element of this campaign. We've had a political launch of the campaign itself, and I know actually you've got a meeting with the Prime Minister coming up. Is that linked to this? Is this where you're going to be raising these issues direct with him?
Yeah, exactly, Tam. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to launch this campaign with officials. We did that in Oxford, officials from all across the UK coming together, one, to offer solidarity to Oxfordshire members, and we did that. We walked through the city centre, we demonstrated outside the council offices, but we went back to one of the fire stations that is set to close to give our solidarity and make sure they understood that they had the backing from all across the UK. We also did a launch to every member. So we did an online launch to make sure our members understand what we're doing, that there is no local fight anymore. This is a national battle that we're taking on. But yes, we went to Westminster a few weeks ago and we politically launched our campaign. So we stood outside Westminster. We were joined by a number of MPs. We were joined by the TUC General Secretary. But we also had speakers from Dorset and Wiltshire, Oxfordshire, talking about the frontline cuts that they have faced. So that political launch was to say to Parliament, to say to the politicians that sit in that building that we're opposite, that we will not stand by while you cut the fire service anymore. We have seen the decimation that's been caused by the Tories and the years of austerity. And actually now we're getting on an industrial footing to fight back on this. And yes, it has. We've seen questions raised in Parliament by the great work that has been done by our officials across the UK. We've seen questions raised in the Scottish Parliament and we've seen questions raised in Westminster. Putting Keir Starmer on the spot at Prime Minister questions last week to answer those questions. So yes, I've got a meeting with him on Wednesday. I've been meeting regularly with the Fire Minister and saying, look, enough is enough on this. This is, as we've just mentioned, this is affecting not just firefighter safety, it's affecting public safety. And we need to see investment and funding right now, and we need to see a reversal of the years of austerity, the years of cuts, to put the fire and rescue service in its rightful place where firefighters can respond to these incidents that we attend 365 days a year, that our safety is recognised, and actually we can perform the duties that we want to in the communities we serve.
No, that's true. I mean, one of the situations one of the things that made me think about the Glasgow fire was there's so much taken for granted about the UK Fire and Rescue Service that will always be there in times of need. And yet we're facing these huge cuts. Perhaps it takes a fire of that scale to bring home the reality of the job our members do, why it's so important and why it's so needed. Now, we talked about the political element. You've mentioned the discussions you're going to have with the Prime Minister. What actually are we expecting to come from these? Because we are a locally controlled service, aren't we? It's fire and rescue authorities or county councils that control the fire and rescue service. What can Parliament, whatever country it's in, deliver?
Well, what we want to see is more central government funding. Because what we have seen over the years, in that 44 fire services in England alone, we then got Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland that we represent firefighters in, with all different models of funding arrangements. County councils, fire authorities, all very different, Tam. So what we want to see is an increase in the central government funding. And look, we think that can actually put fire services on a better footing to stop the cuts, and that's what we're asking for at the moment, or demanding at the moment, is to stop these proposals in these areas where you're going to make dangerous cuts, closing fire stations, cutting firefighter numbers to the tune of a few hundred, actually, in some places. So that's what we want to see, a detailed plan of investment and funding in the fire service. Yes, Labour, this government have made better decisions, and we are seeing, and we have seen in places like Avon and Leicestershire, an increase in funding which has prevented the cuts being made. But we want to see that across the board. We've been quite clear, our members, our officials have been quite clear, and that was reiterated in Oxford at the all-officials meeting, that look, we need funding and we need it now, we need investment, and we will not stand by whilst any fire service faces any more kind of cuts.
And one of the big messages that came out of those two brigades, Avon and Leicestershire, is if you fight, you can win.
Exactly.
You put enough political pressure on, they can come up. Okay, Steve, let's talk about some of the specifics now. Let's go back to what's happening now in Oxfordshire, your old brigade, actually. We had a members' rally, significant rally, on the 10th of December. We've had several meetings and rally points around that since that. But the councillors continue to push through with their consultation. How's the union react? Well, first of all, actually, if you can set out the cuts that are getting faced there again, but then how's the union reacting to that? What's the next steps for our members there?
Okay, well, look, in Oxfordshire, they're looking to close 3 fire stations, but also merge 2 others. That would mean closing and taking away a fire station within these communities. It would mean response times increase from maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes to 20, 30 minutes in some places. It means in some places, day crewing fire stations, firefighters would lose their homes and houses where they've worked and lived and built their families around those communities for many years. They've talked about increasing shift patterns to 12-hour shifts, which we know we've fought off in many places, but we know they're not family friendly, they do not work conducively, we don't think, to a family-friendly fire and rescue service. But also it means taking fire engines out of the city centre of Oxford with the heritage risk there. So the cuts cut across everything, actually, Tam. Shift patterns, firefighter numbers, housing being compromised. So it's quite significant, and you can see why firefighters there wanted us to move to industrial action. So that we've given every opportunity to the Liberal Democrat Council there to say, look, withdraw these proposals, sit around the table with the Fire Brigades Union. I'm willing to go and meet there. National officers are willing to go and meet with them and talk about what the fire and rescue service needs to look like in the future. And that certainly isn't about closing fire stations and trying to make out that this is a reorganisation and redistribution of resources. We know exactly what it is and what it will mean to firefighters and the public. So we want to see those proposals withdrawn. We haven't seen that at this point in time, which is why we've launched the consultative ballot for industrial action.
Steve, just talk us through, what is this consultative ballot?
Yeah, so it launched 2 weeks ago, Tam. It runs for a further 2 weeks. So this is every member of ours in Oxfordshire, 370 firefighters working across the county at all levels. Officer members as well will get a vote in this ballot to talk about what the next steps are in our campaign. And it asks them directly the question, are you willing to take industrial action up to and including strike action to oppose these dangerous proposals that Oxfordshire County Council are forcing through in our rights? So look, we believe that most members will vote yes in this. We have had reps on the ground, officials on the ground. I've met with a number of members in Oxfordshire to talk about what this means, and that they're determined to win this. They're determined to reverse the proposals that are on the table. They want to save these fire stations, save the 42 jobs, save the houses, save the rescue tender, which is looking to be taken out of service in Kidlington, which covers the whole of the county. So look, we'll get that in 2 weeks' time, and that will set the next direction for our campaign, Tom.
I suppose it begs the question, Steve, if we're so confident about this result, why not move straight to a ballot for strike action? Why the consultative ballot? What benefit is there in that?
Well, I think it's about setting the direction of travel. We don't, as you said earlier on in this podcast, Sam, that firefighters do not move to strike action. They do not take that decision lightly. But what we want to do is send a loud and clear message to the employers, to the county council, but also to the government, that a firefighter has not taken strike action in this country, across the UK, for 11 years, but we're at a very real possibility in time now that firefighters will be doing that to protect their communities and to protect themselves. And I think we want to give them every opportunity to get round the table, withdraw these proposals, and let's look at what Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue Service looks like in the future. And when we talk about the actions and the steps we've taken, these will be the next steps we will take with Dorset and Wiltshire.
Yeah.
If you look at their consultation period, they're a couple of months behind, but we will move to that position as well. And if that means discussing things on a national level, Tam, well, that's why we pulled all of our officials together in Oxford a few weeks ago to talk about what that looks like. We've got our conference in May. I think there will be a strong call to make sure that we stand up and stand behind every firefighter that is under attack.
So what's the message, Steve? We're planning a strike in Oxfordshire because we've got no choice. But in terms of other brigades that face cuts, this is coming to you as well.
I think that's the message from our members, Tim.
Yeah.
And I'm here to deliver on those mandates from our members. I think it's absolutely clear. The number one thing that makes firefighters angry is when their safety is compromised and when the public safety is compromised. And that's what this campaign is about. And if we need to move to industrial action, we'll see what the ballot says in Oxfordshire. But I'm certain that the message will be loud and clear, and we'll be able to take that to the County Council in Oxfordshire. But further than that, I'll be taking it to Keir Starmer on Wednesday, that you could have a strike of firefighters in the UK in 2026. And that is not something we want to see, but that is the direction of travel.
And do you think that any politician who's advocating cuts in this scale should be surprised in any way that firefighters are going to take strike action to defend their jobs, their fire service, their communities? I mean, what are these politicians thinking about even taking it this far?
Oh, who knows, Tam? I think that's, I really don't know, because my reflections of working in the fire service for over 2 decades is I see firefighter safety being compromised now. And look, you take Oxfordshire, we lost 2 of our members on the front line last year, and we've spoken about that previously, and we covered that in a previous podcast. But to then force through cuts of this level in a service that has lost 2 frontline firefighters. And you look at the statistics now, firefighters are attending more and more incidents. Since 2015, we've seen an increase in the calls that we attend. Over 700,000 calls, higher than it's been for a number of years. We're attending more and more incidents, not just fires and RTCs, but more and more flooding incidents, wildfires that are ripping through communities. We're seeing terrorism incidents on the rise, but yet we've only got a national agreement in Manchester and London. We've still not got a statutory duty for attending flooding incidents in England. So look, we're doing this. We're attending more and more incidents with less and less resources. I think that's the short answer to all of this. More risk that we're facing, that the communities are facing, but less resources to actually respond and deal with them.